Proverbs chapter 18, a little bit different of a message. I don't know if this is going to be a sermon or a lecture. You'll hear a sermon in just a moment, and you'll hear some sermons tonight. But if I had one message to bring in the morning at a youth conference, this would probably be it. So look down, if you would please, in Proverbs chapter 18, just one verse, very famous verse, verse number 24. A man that hath friends must show himself friendly. And there is a friend that sticketh closer than a brother. I wonder who that is. Jesus. And of course, he that hath friends must show himself friendly. That means if you do not have friends, it means you're not a friendly person. There's always that person, last one to church and the first one to leave, and the church is just unfriendly. You want to speak to people, and you want to be a friendly person. Then in Genesis, the Bible says in chapter 2, it says that God made Adam, and it said, it is not good that the man be alone. So we're going to talk about this subject this morning. If you're not interested, we'll know why. Boy meets girl. Or we may do the opposite. We may speak about girl meets boy. We're not going to talk about boy meets boy. And so we'll go through here. Let's have prayer and we'll go from there. Father, thank you for this time. Help us as we try to get our philosophy straight on this very, very important subject. The kids are already thinking about it. That's what they talk about most of the time. It's on their minds, whether we believe it or not. And I pray that you would help us, give some guidance and maybe some boundaries and some help philosophically on where they're supposed to be on this. In Jesus' name, amen. You may look this way. Years ago, I heard about these Bible college kids, and they were sitting around a dining hall table enjoying a meal. One student happened to be from West Coast Baptist College, and he had his girl across the table from him, and he looked at her and tried to impress her. He said, pass the sugar. And she kind of smiled and kind of looked at him and passed the sugar. About that time, a student from Howes Anderson was there, and he looked around and he said, oh, pass the honey. He said that to his girlfriend, and she passed the honey. And then about that time, a student from Texas Baptist College in Longview was looking at his date. He kind of looked around, and he was trying to think of what was left, and he said, oh, pass the venison, dear. And so she passed the venison to him. And then about that time, a student from Pacific Baptist Bible College was looking around. Wasn't much left on the table. And he goes, oh, okay. He said, pass the tea bag. And so you'll learn all sorts of things here at this college, and it will be a blessing to you. I asked my father, he's been married to my mom for 60 years. And I said, Dad, it's just a miracle. I mean, y'all started off rough and you've been married 60 years. I said, how was that? He said, son, it was just like 5 minutes. I said, really? He said, underwater. And so a happy marriage is what you want. That's what you want. Heard about a fella. He was up at one of these country fairs, and they had the tractor pulls, and they had the cake baking, and they had the sheep judging, and the 4-H, and all that. Just country. And they had a small Cessna airplane, like a crop duster there, and they were giving rides to the people at the fair. And every year, the husband and wife would walk by that plane, and he would say, honey, I'd really like to do the airplane ride. And she said, honey, it's $10. And she said, $10 is $10. We just can't do it. And every year he would go and he'd look at that airplane. He'd say, I'd really like to ride the plane. And she said, I know, but $10 is $10. So many, many years passed. About the time they came to the fair again, and the pilot was just fed up to hear. He said, look, I'm tired of you saying $10 is $10. Just get in the plane. I'll give you a free ride. And it's free. But if you say one word, you owe me $10 each. And the husband says, well, man, that's a good deal. They got on the plane, and, man, he took that thing straight up and nosedived that thing and barrel rolled it. He was trying to get them screaming. They were silent the whole time. The pilot couldn't believe it. He finally landed the plane, looked in the back at the husband, and says, I just cannot believe you guys were silent the whole ride. And the husband said, well, I almost said something when the door flew open and Margaret fell out. But he said $10 is $10. It's just something about love. Outside of salvation, the greatest decision you'll probably make Well, let me just say this. Everyone owes their pastor 1 year in a good Bible college. I like what Brother Trieber says. There's 13 years of school, not counting kindergarten. You go all the way through 12th, you spend 1 year at a Bible college. You say, well, why 1 year? Well, here's what happens. For 1 year, you hear Bible lessons, you hear chapel sermons, and you're just saying, God, am I called to full-time ministry? Am I supposed to be in the ministry and maybe a missionary? Tell me. And you say, well, what if he doesn't call you? You've wasted a year. No, you've invested a year. You've learned the Bible. You've learned how to counsel. You've learned how to be a better soul winner. You've met hundreds of friends that are going to be missionaries and full-time servants around the world. And so it's not a waste. My friend Tim Rule graduated from high school. Then he went to college. And then he went to medical school. Then God called him to preach. About 6 years of college down the drain, he was called to preach. And he said, I looked up and said, God, why didn't you tell me I was supposed to be a preacher before? He said, God looked down and said, I did, but you weren't listening. You don't want to waste 6 or 7 years in a secular college and then find out you're called to ministry. And there's some great Bible colleges around America. But outside of being saved, the greatest permanent decision you'll ever make is who you're going to spend the rest of your life with, who you're going to marry. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but about 6 years from now, most of the people in this room will have one of these on their hand. And some of you may have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 children seated around you by then. You're going to get married. And girls, miracles still happen to some of these guys. There's going to be some blind girl marry these guys. It's going to happen. Now, I need just an illustration. I need a shoe from a girl just for a second. Just a shoe, and it can't be smelly, and it can't have a hole in it. A shoe. It's got to be a slip-on shoe, not a tennis shoe. A slip-on shoe. Anyone have one? Just real quick. Here, see if I can just catch it. See what kind of... Are you going to throw it? Whoa, pretty good. Not bad. All right. Here. Size 12 and a half. Unbelievable. But I remember seeing that fairy tale years ago. Who was it? I don't know if it's Beauty and the Beast, Prince Charming, something. Disney, I think. But it was the guy that he fell in love with this girl, and they're dancing all night. And then at midnight, she turns into a pumpkin or something like that. And this carriage pulls up, and she jumps on the carriage, and he goes, what's your name? And he didn't know who she was, and all she left behind was a slipper. You remember the story? And then he goes house to house, soul winning, door to door. If you died today, would this slipper fit you? Did you get one of these or something? And so he's knocking on the door and trying to slip the slipper on the girl's foot. It goes something like that. Now, the Bible says a prudent wife is from the Lord. The word prudent translates matched. You know, when you find the right person, the shoe will fit. The shoe will fit. God is the greatest matchmaker in the whole world. He has already got the person picked out for you that will complete you better than anyone else. They'll be weak where you're strong and strong where you're weak. And believe this or not, girls, when you surrender to do God's will, that does not mean you will marry an ugly person and be a missionary to Africa. Some of you right now, you're thinking, if I just surrender to God's will, that means I'm going to marry some ugly guy. You know, in your eyes, he will be handsome. Now, maybe not in our eyes, but to you, it'll be, look at this handsome guy. And fellas, same thing with you. That girl may not look beautiful to us. By the way, right now, she has that Coca-Cola figure. Give her about 10 years, it'll be a 2-liter. But to you, she will look beautiful. It'll be like, oh, my beautiful wife. You got to be kidding. I mean, this is her. I was speaking at someone's church a while back, Brother Gray. I'm not going to name who. I never would, sworn to secrecy. And I'm trying to figure out who's the pastor's wife. And I'm just kind of looking. And I saw some lady. I thought maybe she was the janitor, maybe the maid for the building or something. That was his wife. I mean, I would have never picked those two together. I'm glad I kept my mouth shut. And hey, are you the maid? Hey, here's $1. Thanks for keeping my room clean. I'm the pastor's wife. And so just several thoughts on this here. I used to tell my daughters, and they're married now, when they were teenagers, I would say, Charity, Faith. I would say, the guy, and they'd say, yeah, Dad, guy, yeah. I said, who you're going to marry. Yes, Dad, tell us more. Tell us more. Guy, marriage. I said, is. They said, come on, Dad. Who? Tell us. Is. I said, probably. They said, yes, he's probably. I said, already alive. And they would always say, well, I hope so. Hey, girls, the guy you're going to marry is probably already alive. Now, that's encouraging. He may be in the nursery, but he's already alive. He may be in your primary church service, but he's already alive. Let me just give you some practical thoughts by way of introduction on this boy meets girl type thing. By way of introduction, marriage is good. Marriage is good. The Bible says marriage is good and the bed undefiled. So when God designed marriage, he said it's good. Now we hear all these horror stories. Oh, you got married and they divorced and he beat her and she beat him and drugs and terrible. That's many marriages, but yours doesn't have to be that way. I remember my mom and dad did not have a good marriage when I was a boy. I remember Dad would be gone for a month at a time. One time gone 3 months, never even called. Then he'd come home and my mom would say, honey, I can't raise these boys by myself. My dad quietly would walk to the closet, take all of his clothes, put them in the car, drive off while we're crying. And all I figured was that's probably how his dad did. And that's all he saw. And I remember standing on the street as we'd see all of our neighbors driving off for vacation and driving off to go fishing or hunting and shooting hoops with their boys. And my dad was never home. I remember saying, when I get married, it's not going to be like that. When I get married, we're taking vacations. When I get married, we're going to laugh. When I get married, I'm going to shoot hoops with the boys and we're going to go fishing and it's going to be all different. And let me just say this, it has been all different for me. I'm living out a dream of what I always wanted a dad to be in the home. Now, some of you kids here, you've never seen a good marriage. Some of you right now, you don't have a dad in the home or you have a stepdad in the home or there's drugs and there's hollering and there's screaming and there's holes in the walls and there's not any submission and it's tense. Your home does not have to be that way. When you get out of there and go off to Bible college and meet some man of God or woman of God and marry, hey, it can be home sweet home and it will be better. But you got to get the right one. You got to get the right one. Marriage is good. Second, anyone can get married if they stoop low enough. Anyone can get married if they stoop low enough. The goal is not marriage. It's marrying the right person. You know, any of you girls, 18, 19, 20 right now, you could be married in 3 months from right now if you stoop low enough. You can meet someone on the internet. You could meet someone who would marry you. Number 3, beauty is vain. Now again, you will think they're beautiful, but there's more to marriage than beauty. And I have found, girls, those good-looking guys, and there's not many of us in the ministry, not many of us, but those real good-looking guys, sometimes you can't trust them. I wonder who's chasing them when you're not around. And those beautiful girls that look like models off the covers of magazines, they look so beautiful because they're staring in the mirror for about 4 hours a day. The goal is not the girl staring in the mirror. Fellas, you want the girl staring at you. So beauty is vain. Maybe you heard about the story. This fella married this girl with a beautiful voice, operatic voice, and she could sing like opera. She was pretty good looking, but beautiful voice. He married her. They went on the honeymoon. First morning in bed, he rolled over, looked at her, and said, sing quick. Maybe you heard about the fella. He married this beautiful girl, and they're on the honeymoon. He carries her across the threshold. By the way, fellas, if you can't pick her up and carry her across the threshold, don't marry her. And so he picked her up, carried her across the threshold, shut the door. She opened the drawer in the motel room, took her wig off, put it in the top drawer. Took out her teeth, put them in the top drawer. Took a hearing aid out, put it in the top drawer. Unscrewed her wooden leg, put it in the top drawer. Took her makeup off, put it in the top drawer. He said, I'm not trying to be weird or anything. Do I get in the bed or do I get in the top drawer? He didn't know where he was supposed to go. Maybe you heard the story about this lady. She was walking by a pet store. And as she walked by, they had a talking parrot in the cage. And as she walked by, that parrot said, hey, lady, you're ugly. She was so upset, she just stormed past the pet store. On the way back from work that day, she passed that same parrot. He goes, hey, lady, you are ugly. She got so upset, she complained to the pet store owner and said, if you don't shut that parrot up, I'm going to sue you. I'm going to buy that bird. I'm going to kill that bird. I'm going to give you havoc. He said, okay, I'll take care of it. She walked by that parrot the next day, and the parrot said, hey, lady. She looked. He said, you know. Beauty is vain. The Bible says favor is deceitful and beauty is vain. Number next, it boils down to trust. Is God big enough to give you the right mate for your life? 1 Peter 3 says, in the old time, the women that trusted God, it refers to Sarah and Abraham. So what's that mean? Is God big enough to give you the right person without you having to chase them down? When someone goes online and says, good looking girl, looking for good Christian guy, please send photo. When you're shopping and goodchristiansingles.com and all this kind of stuff, it's not trust. Hey, who's that guy over there? Give him my phone number. Tell him to text me. Meet me on Facebook. You're trying to mess with God's job right there. Here's what's going to happen. You just need to get busy reading your Bible, get on a bus route, soul winning, and one day as you're just busy serving God, not needing a boyfriend or girlfriend, one day you're going to look over and say, who's that? And they're already heading the same direction. They're growing in grace, and they weren't chasing you, and you weren't chasing them. And pretty soon, little Cupid, his name translates Gabriel. He's one of the angels. You get that later? Cupid's going to shoot you, and all of a sudden it's going to be, who is that? And it's going to be, who is that? Okay, we'll get into the rest of that translation later. Maybe it was Michael. It wasn't Gabriel, the angel. Boils down to trust. Number next, the shoe will fit. Number next, use the authorities in your life. I like what Brother Gray preaches. I heard him preach it here many years ago. He says when Solomon was training his son Rehoboam, he could teach him about finances, friends, laziness, sleeping too much, lying, all these things. But when it came to teaching him about the opposite gender, he said, I cannot teach you anything, Rehoboam. Just give me your heart. I'm going to have to help you. You're not going to have any sense once you see that beautiful girl. We're not going to have any sense, so give me your heart. I will help guide you through this. So important. What a beautiful girl in our youth group. If we ever get another one in our youth group, I'll let you know. But it was many, many years ago. Her name was Sandra. Beautiful Indian complexion, long jet black hair. Her mother had died because of alcohol. Her dad was not in the picture. She came to me when she was in about 9th grade and said, Pastor, she said, I know I'm very vulnerable right now. No dad in my life. She said, as guys begin to get interested in me, she said, I don't want to mess up. She said, can I just send them to you and you screen them for me? Because I know my dad wouldn't do that. I said, Sandra, I'll be glad to. I'll be glad to. She goes, okay. All right, here we go. And about that time, we had this long-haired boy that got saved in our youth group, ponytail down to his waist, earring. He'd been saved all of a week, but I think someone discipled him real fast. He comes into the teen meeting that second Sunday night with a rose, and he gives that rose to Sandra. And all the girls said, help me, girls. And that's what happened, and that's what she did. Her heart melted. Her heart began palpitating. That night, I called her into the office. I said, Sandra, I heard, Weasel Face gave you, the new convert gave you a rose tonight. She goes, oh, isn't he cute? I said, he's a bum, and we don't know how many kids he's fathered out of wedlock. I don't know if he's got AIDS. I don't know if he's a drug addict. He's a brand new kid. So what if he comes to our teen group? One flower doesn't mean anything. No! She started crying in my office. She's going to be an old maid. She's 16. I just ran off the only suitor that was chasing her. By the way, he's been in and out of jail, 3 illegitimate children, all messed up, gangs all tattooed up. That's what she missed out on. She gets to Bible college. These fellas start coming to me. Can I go on a date with Sandra? Can I go on a date with Sandra? And I was their professor. I would say, thanks for asking. No. And finally, Steve Reyes got real interested in her. Sat with her in chapel, and she said, you're going to have to talk to my pastor if this goes any further. He sat down, he said, I would like to pursue Sandra. I said, Steve, I have a few questions for you. Tell me every thought you've ever thought in your whole life. Have you ever lusted? Have you ever looked at pornography? How many souls have you won? How much do you pray every day? How many times have you read the Bible all the way through? How many souls have you led to Christ? Are you on a bus route? Are you right with your parents? Tell me everything. Man, I asked him every question there was. He is turning beet red in 59 shades of colors. They're married. They're missionaries to Chile. They have 3 beautiful kids. And she's smiling. She's not crying. and she's not raising those kids alone. Check with the authorities of your life. Now, if you're not close to your dad, girls, choose your pastor, a youth pastor. Just say, do you mind? You say, well, why would we do this? This is kind of silly. Here's why. Because your mom can spot, fellas, a Jezebel. And your dad can spot a wolf. A wolf is the guy that comes into the church service on Sunday night, sits on the back row, slouches, and he's just scanning all the girls that he can ruin. Several years ago, I preached one whole sermon to one kid on the back row, the whole sermon. And it was just how to kill a wolf. He never came back and bothered our girls. He just never did. Use the authorities in your life. My daughters, same thing. Both of my girls, Dad, so-and-so's going to be asking you if they can take me out. Tell them no. Several years ago, I got my first deer, Brother Gray. And I remember that great story about you getting that big buck down in Kentucky or wherever it was. I remember the story. You said, Pastor Ray, where did you get your first deer? Interstate 680. Did I get it with a bow? No. Did I get it with a rifle? No. Did I get it with a blowgun? No. I got it with my bumper. It is November 2 years ago. And there's a certain season in the deer's life when all of a sudden the male deer, and that's the ones with the horns, that's Rudolph, Donner, Blitzen, all them. The male deer, the bucks, they have only one thing on their mind, and that's to find a girlfriend deer. They can smell the perfume miles away. And they're not thinking of safety at that time. They're thinking of that one opposite gender. So I'm driving my car. I'm doing 75 miles an hour. I'm going down 680, heading to Bible college. It's 5 o'clock in the morning. There's 5 lanes. There's a huge 8-foot cement wall. Then there's 5 lanes. No one on the road but me. And I'm driving. And all of a sudden, there's a big buck that has flown over that wall and lands right in my car long enough to look and ask, who's killing me? And it was my car. I hit him, and he splattered to kingdom come, didn't find the horns. No, we didn't eat the meat. No, we didn't mount it on the wall. There wasn't enough left. Now, why did he wreck his life? Because there was something else on his mind. And there's a lot of young people that wreck their lives, and they're not safe. So that's why we're trying to help you a little bit today. So what do you look for? Let me just give you a list. And if you have a blank page in your Bible, I'm hoping you'd maybe jot some of these things down. Maybe where it says births, since you might not have any kids this year, or deaths, since you might not die, or maybe the maps or somewhere like that in your notes. So what do you look for? What would you think would be the number one important thing? Just ask it in your mind. Would it be, well, they have to be at Bible college? Would it be, they have to be a soul winner? Would it be, or they saved? Nope, there's something more important than all of those. Here it is. Opposite gender. That's the most important thing to look for. Opposite gender. That means if you have long hair, you want someone with short hair. If you have perfume on, you want a guy that doesn't have perfume on. What to look for? Opposite gender. Some of you didn't even get this thing. Fellas, you fall in love with the girl. Girls, you fall in love with a guy. Okay, number 2, right with authority. You want someone who's right. If the girl's not right with mom and dad, you don't date her or court her. If the fella's a rebel in the youth group, not right with his pastor, not right with his boss, you say, how come? God never blesses rebellion. He just never does. The fella will never get a raise. He'll never climb the ladder. You'll never have nice things. Number 2. Number 3, no ditch sins. No ditch sins. What's that mean? Sin is sin, but there are some sins that are more addicting than others. They all start with a L. Here they are. Lust, laziness, lying. Someone says, now he lies a lot, but he usually tells the truth to me. That is not who you want to fall in love with. Well, I know, he's got a problem with pornography, but I think I'll break him. That is not who you want. A ditch sin is something that you get into and it's hard to get out of. The Bible in Proverbs says a whore or an immoral woman is a deep ditch. Here's another one, losing it. Losing it. He sure has got a bad temper. Man, he hits his car and hits the house, and one day he's going to hit you. You don't want to marry someone you have to reform. Marriage is not a reform school. Well, he's only killed 9 people. I'm trying to get him out of the gang. That's not who you date. Number next, character. Character. You want someone who just does right all the time. So what would a girl look for in a guy? Character. Can he work? When there's work days here for this youth conference, if I was a girl, I would have stopped by and just checked out to see all the guys that showed up for the work day. You don't want a playboy, you want a work man. Can he work? Now, if she's a girl, here's what you want. Can she cook? Can she bake a cherry pie? Billy boy, Billy boy. Can she bake a cherry pie? Here's what I did. Brother Ross, when our girls were getting marriage age, I made a list of all the meals they had to be able to cook before I would let them get married. It was black-eyed peas and cornbread. It was fried chicken. It was apple pie. It was Thanksgiving meal. It was baked potatoes. It was salads. It was on and on and on. Big old long list. I said, I'm not going to have a son-in-law angry at me because he marries a girl that cannot cook. I got a friend of mine, he was raised in orphanages, never had good meals. He finally falls in love with this beautiful girl, and he says, can you cook? She said, yes. He said, hot meals? She said, toast. Girls, toast is not a hot meal. Someone says, man, I'm going to heat up a Pop-Tart and put it on this pillow every morning. That's not breakfast in bed. You won't, fellas, is cooking important, yes or no? Do you like to eat, yes or no? Yes. Most important equipment in the entire house is that refrigerator. You're going to see it, girls. He's going to get up 2 or 3 times in the middle of the night and just open the door to make sure that food is safe. If he hears a burglar, first thing he's going to do is going to get that gun, go check on the refrigerator. Later, he'll check on the kids and then check on you. Food is an important thing. If you don't think it's so, God made Adam. First thing he did, he dropped him in a garden full of food. Isaac is dying. He says, go kill something so I can eat it. And that's just how we men think. Number next, attentiveness in church. Attentiveness in church. Are they paying attention in church? If they're not listening to him, they're not going to listen to you. And girls, some of you are going to marry some preacher boy. You know what that means? One day he's going to be preaching a sermon and you're going to be doing this. Okay, moving right along. Number next, attentiveness in church. Next, fun. Are they fun? I had a friend, Brother Gray, in Bible college. He was dating a girl. I think she had memorized the whole New Testament. And I said, well, how was that date? He said, I don't want to marry the Apostle Paul. She knew the Bible, but she wasn't any fun. That's why we are fundamentalists. I came home from church one day, and this person at church had given me a coffee mug and had a rooster for the handle, and it said, I rule the roost. I came home, put that on the table. I told my wife, I said, look at that. They know who runs this house. And she said, they gave me a coffee mug too. And it had a hen for the handle. It says, I rule the rooster. I was on my first alligator hunting trip down in the bayous of Morgan City. My son begged to go, Jonathan. He was 10 years of age at that time. My wife was very, very uptight about it. She said, I don't want him to go. He's going to get hurt. I said, what could happen? It's just a swamp full of alligators. He'll be fine. And by the way, it's just like those TV shows that's on right now. I mean, it's just like that. So I'm on the boat. I get a little reception on my cell phone, and I'm in kind of that cut-up mood. And so I call. It rings, and she says, how's Jonathan? I said, well, if you're not interested in how I'm doing, I'll have a little fun. I said, he fell in, and an alligator bit his hand off. I said, but he's fine. He's all stitched up. He'll be fine. There was silence on that phone. A few minutes or a few moments later, I said, nah, he's fine. She did not think that was funny at all. Years later, I was speaking out of town. My daughter Faith had her wisdom teeth out. So I called home. I said, so babe, how is Faith doing after her surgery? My wife said, the ambulance just left. We couldn't stop the bleeding. And I was real quiet. She said, now how's that feel about that alligator 4 years ago? What are you thinking now? You just want to have some fun. When we first got married, we were broke. I know, they probably pay you guys millions of dollars here, but we were broke for some reason. My wife graduated from Bible college, got paid $180, Brother Gray, $180 per month. It was like $1 an hour. I asked her, I said, honey, where did all that money go? She said, I just don't know where it all went. And so we're broke as we can be. It's Valentine's Day. We walked in one of those Hallmark stores that sells those fancy cards. And so we walked in. I said, and I found a real romantic card. I said, come here. I said, if I had the money, I would buy you this card. And she read it and she goes, you are too good to me. She said, wait right here. She went over and found a card. She said, come here. She said, if I had the money, this is the card I would buy for you. We have saved thousands of dollars through the years. Hey, back on this thing of cooking for a moment. You want to make millions of dollars? Someone ought to come up with a perfume, not like Michael Jordan or Tiger Woods. Someone ought to come up with a food perfume. Hey, girls, you want to attract a guy? Psst, psst, cheeseburger. Psst, psst, burritos. Psst, 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 fried crawfish. Psst, crawfish boil. Psst. Guys, what is that? That's her. That's Gertrude. Man, she smells like a cheeseburger. Man, I'm going to ask her out. I'm just helping you. You can make millions of dollars doing this. Here's another one quickly. What do you look for? Look at their family. People think, well, I'm marrying her. It has nothing to do with the family. Oh, that's what you think. You're marrying into the family. If you walk in their house the first time and the first song that comes to your mind is this, da-da-da-dun, da-da-da-dun, you're in trouble. Or girls, you're not going to admit it, but I guarantee you, you've seen enough of these Anne of Green Gables and Gone with the Wind or whatever, some of these ancient movies, Christmas in Hawaii or whatever it is, White Christmas. You've seen enough of these movies that I guarantee you, you're thinking, when I get married and I kiss my husband, I'm going to stroke my fingers through his hair. Someone wrote a poem on their wedding day. It went like this. I pressed a kiss to her lips, and what could I do but linger? I stroked my fingers through her hair, and a cootie bit my finger. So, girls, you're thinking you're going to stroke your fingers through his hair. You better look at his daddy. Is his daddy bald? 4 stages of hair growth: bald, fuzz, was. So if that's a big thing to you, you better look at that family. Heard about a fella, he did not get along with his mother-in-law, just couldn't stand her. Finally, the mother-in-law kicked the bucket, the Lord took her home. And so the mother-in-law was laying in the casket, and the son-in-law and his wife were sitting in the back, expressionless, no emotion. Finally, they filed by the casket. They were the last ones to come by, and the son-in-law looked at his mother-in-law in that casket and just emotionally fell apart, began weeping and wailing. His wife grinned and looked over at her husband and said, you did love my mother, didn't you? He said, no, I thought I saw her move. You marry into the family. Here's another one quickly. Nothing physical. Nothing physical. The Bible is opposite of the world. The world, they used to have just an old rock song. It went like this. Hello, I love you. Won't you tell me your name? Hello, I love you. Won't you tell me your name? What's your name again? That's how the world is. It's all flesh. It's all physical. And that's why if you're not careful, you watch all these primetime shows, the word love is translated L-U-S-T, lust. That's not real love. And that's why you find people, these Hollywood starlets and the movie stars and Dancing with the Stars, all these people we look to and say, wow, they're rich and they're beautiful, and they cannot keep a husband and they cannot keep a wife. Here's a Tiger Woods, couldn't keep his wife, couldn't keep those other 10 folks. He divorces her. She gets his $10 million house. She rents a tractor and bulldozes the house. Nothing physical. There was something I used to eat many years ago. They used to be in boxes. Now they're in bags. Do you remember these? Cracker Jacks. The caramel covered peanuts and the popcorn. I don't know how many boxes of Cracker Jacks I've had in my life, but I've never eaten the whole box. I don't even like Cracker Jacks. But I have opened many of them and taken out the prize. How many of you know what I'm talking about? You know, it's always some cool little ring or little comic book that's microscopic or some little magic trick. And that's oftentimes, girls, a guy's goal. They don't like Cracker Jacks. But all they want is the prize. A girl is looking for a relationship. I want him to know the real me. We're going to talk and communicate. Most guys, they don't want to talk at all. They don't even care what your name is. All they want is that prize they can get for you, from you. And that's why oftentimes you see couples in public school, well, they're an item. Yet 2 weeks later, he's trashing her, she's trashing him. It's hate. It's all over Facebook. How come? Because it wasn't about a relationship. It was all about getting the prize. You say, well, where's that prize come in? The bedroom and marriage. That's the prize you give your husband on the honeymoon. And that's the prize you give your wife on the honeymoon. You say, well, is it really important? Sometimes we think, well, man, I'm missing out on all the fun. So here's a teenager, immoral with this guy or girl, immoral, party, then get married, put the ring on, live happily ever after. It doesn't go that way. Because if you could not resist immorality all those years, one little piece of gold or diamond does not stop all those habits and desires. Well, if I'm not immoral and let them touch me, I'm not going to get a guy because God's not big enough. God's big enough. You want to walk down that aisle in white and it means something? Because one day, fellas, and one day, girls, they're going to ask. You're going to be in the I love you stage and maybe planning a wedding, and then it's going to come up. It's going to be, am I the first one? Will I be the first one? And you'll want to say, I have saved myself for you. Important. Nothing physical. We've made all these decisions. Maybe you've made a decision. I'm going to keep myself pure. Let me give you one better than that. You ready? Here it is. Never alone. Never alone. That's even a song. He's promised, no, never alone. No, that's not what it's talking about, but that would be a good rule for you. You say, what do you mean? If you're never alone with the opposite gender, you'll never mess up. So I don't know about that. You ever been at a youth conference, halfway through the sermon, wait a minute, stop those kids over here. What are they doing? They're hugging, they're kissing, they're about to be immoral. I've never seen that in the middle of a youth conference. But it's, Mom and Dad's not home. Want to come over? Hey, I'll pick you up in the car. A car's just a motel on wheels. Hey, I need to tell you something behind the new building. I don't want anybody to hear. Girls, be wary of that guy or that girl that's always wanting you to be away from the crowd, away from the lights. Men love darkness rather than light. Again, he just wants the prize. He doesn't want the Cracker Jacks. Never alone. Here's another one quickly, and we must hasten. How do they treat the poor? If they're snobby and only treat the rich people well, they will not treat you well. That's pride. How do they treat the poor? Next, are they a soul winner? Why would you want to marry someone that doesn't care about people's souls? Well, they're never at soul winning. They're just shy. Marry a soul winner. If they can love the souls of strangers and lost people, they'll love you too. Here's another one. Similar backgrounds. If they just got out of a gang, they've murdered 72 people, and you're the deacon's daughter, and you grew up in church, it might not be a good match. You said, well, we're on parole. We got the same parole officer. Man, that's a good match right there. Man, that's a good one. We were in jail together. I saw him across the bars. We met in a bar. Yeah, okay, that's a good match. Number next, friends first. Friends first. I remember when my daughter Faith began falling in love. That is Sadie Hawkins Day. You girls know what that is? It's when at college the girls one time can ask the guys on the date. They did that because so many of the guys were just so afraid and shy. So my daughter Faith said, I'm going to ask Eli. He's a friend. I won't be nervous. We'll have a good time. And that friend, she started emailing him that summer. And pretty soon she said, Dad, I think I'm growing to like Eli. She's married. They have 2 kids. We're hoping they'll make it. Number next, a walk with God. A walk with God. If they'll spend time with him, they'll be better for you. A walk with God. Number next, and we're about done. Well, let me just testify. We're about finished here. Someone that's spiritual. Had a friend of mine years ago named Jack Kemp. I'm not going to mention his name. Not the one that ran for political office. And back in the day, you would mail letters to people you liked. It was before the cell phones, and long distance calls cost a lot. Sometimes you'd put the little stamps upside down and perfume and all that. Well, Jack Kemp really liked this girl, and he started calling her and writing her, and she was a little distance away. One day he came to me and he said, I don't know what happened, man. It's off. She's not responding. She's not answering calls. She's not writing. I said, well, what was the last correspondence? He said, well, I just sent her a letter. And he said, I signed it with a Bible verse, 1 John 4:8. And it says something like, God is love. I just wrote the reference. I said, Jack, are you sure you wrote 1 John 4:8? I said, what if you wrote John 4:8? We looked it up. It said something like this. You have been married to 5 men, and the man you're living with now is not your husband. He called her a harlot in the letter. He wrote the wrong verse. So get a guy that knows how to write the right verses. Someone that's spiritual. What a girl in Bible college in our youth group. She finished college all 4 years. A fella fell in love with her, wanted to marry her. And she said, I just sense he's not sold out to God. And if he won't give him all, he's not going to give me all. She didn't marry him. Came back to work on the church staff single. And there's always these people think they're being funny saying, oh, 4 years at college and you didn't get your MRS degree. What's wrong with you? Because the right guy hadn't walked by yet. She came to teach in our Christian school. And about a year later, one of the tallest, long-haired guys I've ever seen came in our church. Very educated. Got saved that Sunday. Caught on fire. That afternoon, he asked the pastor, he said, now I've been saved and baptized today. What should I do? He said, start in the book of 1 John. He came back to church that night and said, I've read the book of 1 John 5 times. Now what? Caught on fire, became the bus director at the church. One day he said, Pastor, who's this girl? One day she said, Pastor, who's this guy? They've been married for about 30 years. He's the bus director. God's shoe always fits. Done with this. We have 5 more minutes? Okay, cool. We had a fella saved at our church. He was the biggest drug dealer, methamphetamine, in Napa County. Many of you would know him personally. He got saved. He said, Pastor, he said, I want you to keep me busy. He said, I need to stay out of trouble. So he began printing our church tracts. Just thousands of them a week, filling up a room. About that time, I knocked on a lady's door, and she said, I found one of these in my bush. She said, I guess someone put it on my door, and it blew into my bush. Oddest thing, she said, I told myself if I got another invitation to this church, I would come. The tract got her to church. She got saved the first Sunday, got baptized. 6 months later, she's looking at him. And she said, Pastor, who's this guy? And he said, Pastor, who's this girl? At their wedding, I told the story. They never knew, she never knew the guy that printed the tract would one day become her husband. So the goal of the story is if you're single, you just put tracts in people's bushes, and that's what you do. Let me testify and then I'm done. I was the Bible college kid that was too busy to date. I was not the guy that showed up on the campus, asked all these girls to sit with me in these activities. I had a bus route, Sunday school class, I was called to preach. So I didn't date for like 3 years in Bible college, too busy. But the last year of college, I saw this girl. I always wondered, I wonder if this would be a match. Took all the courage I could. By the way, it's hard to ask a girl out. It's spooky. We men don't like rejection. And I asked her, I said, would you sit with me in chapel? She said, what? I said, would you sit with me in chapel? She said, sure. Wasn't long before I knew that I loved her. We walked around the lake at college, and I remember sitting down by the little bridge there, and I said, Verna, I love you. And when a fella says that, he's waiting for a response. It's, I love you, and she said, that's nice. I said, I don't know if you heard me. I said, I love you. She said, that's nice. I said, wow, what a rebellious woman. I went back to the dorm that night. Oh, God, help this woman love me. Make her love me. And so the next week, we're walking back to her ride back home that Sunday night. And I said, Verna, I love you. And she said, I love you too. And that's when it happened. I pulled my jacket off, set my Bible down, my cape came out, the S on my shirt, and I began flying all the way back to the dormitory that night. Wasn't long before I was shopping for an engagement ring. I mean, I was out of college. I was ready to go. And back in my day, we didn't have all the money that you kids have here. Back in my day, you would buy an engagement ring and have to put it under a microscope to see, is there really a diamond on this ring? Yep, yeah, there's one there. When my son Eric, my son-in-law, got engaged to my daughter Charity, he took her on the top tower of the Golden Gate Bridge, up where the light bulbs are, way at the very, very top. That's where he got engaged. My son-in-law Eli rented a hot air balloon, was flying over Napa Valley, got on his knee, got engaged to my daughter Faith. We didn't do that when I was growing up. We didn't have that kind of plan. I asked my three sons, Jonathan and Paul and Stephen, our twins, I said, so what are you going to do? Rent a rocket ship? Are you going to propose on the moon? Or what? How do you top that? So I'm walking around the lake, and I'm thinking and praying, and a friend of mine, Toby Weaver, was on the staff at the college, and my wife worked grading papers for him, secretary of work. I said, Brother Weaver, I said, would you check something out for me? I said, man, I want to propose to Verna. I'm in love. I want to marry her, but if I propose, I don't want her to say, that's nice. I said, why don't you check it out? He said, all right. He said, where will you be? I said, I'll be in the lobby. He said, all right. So my wife came in to do some work for him and said, Verna, I heard you guys have been dating pretty heavy and you're in love. She said, yep, we're in love. We're in love. He said, well, what if Mike proposed? She said, oh, it's way too soon. He wouldn't propose. He said, well, what if he did? She goes, oh, I'd say yes. Well, just wondering. He left the office, came into the lobby, caught my attention and said, all systems go. And then he just walked out of the way. I asked her, I said, hey, let's take a walk this afternoon. So there we are walking around that lake, same place again. I sit down. It's probably the corniest thing I've ever done. I've done a lot of corny things since then. So here it is. We're walking around the lake. I said, well, let's sit here. Same place I told her I loved her. I said, look at that. And when she looked, I got on my knee. By the way, girls, do not marry a guy that does not get on his knee. Brother Gray, did you get on your knee? All right, I knew it. I got on my knee. Now, if he's ambulatory, has no knees, it's okay. So I'm on my knee, and I'm thinking of my little speech. I said, Verna, I said, I'm a preacher, and we preachers give invitations. This is so corny. I am about to give an invitation, and I only want one person to respond. And I'd already thought of, she said, that's nice. She was going in the lake, just pushing her right in. I said, will you marry me? And she goes, yes, I will. What happened next? I'll never tell you. Anyway, but we were in Bible college. It's been a wonderful journey. She's from Maine, a town of 200. A Yankee. She parks the car in the yard. I'm from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, or southern as they come. God brought us all the way to the Chicagoland area to meet. We grew up in Louisiana our first 7 years of marriage, and now we've been 27 years in California. You know, only God can do that. God's plan is the greatest plan in the world. He's given us 5 beautiful children. 3 are full-time ministry. 2 have 1 more year to go, and they're looking for a wife. By the way, Paul and Stephen are seniors in Bible college. 3 things they're looking for in a girl: beautiful, spiritual, and rich. So if any of you girls are interested, maybe you have a weird last name like Humperdinck or something. Think of that last name, Ray. Florissa Ray. That's a great name. And if you don't like my sons, at least you get me as a father-in-law. I mean, think of it. It would be great. So let me ask you a question. Are you preparing to be what you ought to be right now? It's not, I wonder what, you make sure you're what you ought to be. So when Mr. Right or Miss Right comes along, you're prepared. They're alive right now. Be patient. Don't mess up. Not alone. And you'll have a wonderful someday. Let's pray.